Hi everyone. In this Sup with SAP video, we are going to explore fulfillment, where we work through the transactions necessary to sell a finished good or trade good to an outside customer. Let's go ahead and get started. Just like our previous video where we worked through things from the request phase to the actual movement phase to the money phase, we're going to do the same thing with fulfillment. So the initial transaction for fulfillment is going to be that a customer makes a request for pricing, but we don't actually have any commitment from the customer or from us in terms of actual material movement or money movement. So the very first transaction that we're going to be looking at is a sales quotation. And the location of this transaction is in logistics. It's in sales and distribution, it's in the sales folder, and it's in the quotation folder. And the transaction code we're going to be using is VA21, which is creating a quotation. For all of our quotations, the quotation type is going to be a standard quotation, which is QT. I just searched for it, but of course you could just type QT once you're familiar with this process. For our sales organization, it depends on where you're going to be eventually selling your goods. At the moment, we are going to be selling from our Miami plant, so we're going to be selling in the East Coast. Later on this semester, we'll be dealing with the San Diego plant, and so we would choose UW00 for the West Coast. But for today, UE00 for our Miami plant. For our distribution channel, it turns out that the East Coast only has one, which is the wholesale channel. We're going to be selling to distributors. We're not selling directly to customers. When you deal with the West Coast, you'll have a second choice, which is internet sales, but for today we won't be exploring that. For our division, there are a couple different choices. We might be selling just accessories. It's possible we're only selling accessories. It's also possible we're only selling bicycles, so you may choose one or the other depending on what you're selling. Or if you have an order that is a mix of bicycles and accessories, you could choose cross division. For today's example, I'm just going to be selling a few of our trade goods, so I'm going to choose accessories. The last two fields you can leave blank, and once you've filled all of this in, you can click the green checkbox to move to the next step. What we're doing in the quotation is we are providing the customer with information on what our pricing would be for the items they're interested in purchasing over a specific time period. So in this case, we will need to enter the customer we're going to sell to. I'm going to do a wildcard search for my customers. And I'm going to choose a customer that's located on the East Coast. In this case, I'm going to choose Peachtree Bikes, which is 4 and then your 3 digits. For the quotation, you do not need to enter a purchase order number, and you don't need to enter a purchase order date. You will have to enter both a valid from and a valid to date. Quotations are a promise that we will honor a particular price if the customer actually orders what they are considering during a particular time period. So we need to have a quotation that expires after some number of days. I'm going to search for valid to, and I'm just going to choose a date that is 2 weeks from today's date. So I'm choosing a date that's a little bit farther into the future. And then I'm going to quote a specific item in specific quantity for this customer. And we're going to keep this very simple. We're going to quote pricing on some t-shirts. So I'm entering my shirts, and I'm going to offer 10 of them. And I'm going to go ahead and click the green checkbox and let the system populate what the quotation should be. So in this case, you can see that 10 shirts, the net value for this customer would be $300. Our standard price that we offer to our consumer or our customers is $30 per shirt. In our previous video, we bought shirts for $15 a piece, but we sell them for $30. So we make 100% profit on every shirt that we sell. Not too bad. There's nothing else that we need to do with this quotation. This is again just offering some sort of pricing and promising to honor that price over a specific time period. This looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and click the Save button. This is going to create a quotation, and I'm going to copy that number to my notepad file for future reference. In the real world, after providing a quote for a customer, we would hope that before that quote expires, the customer would recontact us and say that they would want to move forward with an actual order. And that's exactly what we're going to do right now. The time period is a few seconds as opposed to a few days or weeks, but the process is still the same. The customer is going to decide to move forward with an earlier quote. The location of the next transaction is in the order folder, just underneath quotation, and it's VA01. We're going to create a sales order. Just like in the procurement video where we could have started with a purchase order and skipped the requisition step, it is absolutely possible during fulfillment to skip the quotation step and go straight to creating a sales order. If a customer calls us up or gets online and decides they absolutely want to buy something and they don't need a quote from us, we could proceed immediately to this step. So we could potentially skip VA21 and move straight to VA01, but for today, we're going to adopt the information we have from our earlier quote and use it to populate our sales order. The order type here is going to be the standard OR. If you search the list of all the different types of orders, you will potentially see OR1. That is not correct for what we're trying to do in this class and will potentially cause you some difficulties if you have items from both bicycles and accessories. So don't choose that. What you're going to want to choose is standard order, which is actually lower down the list. The sales organization is still going to be the East Coast. The distribution channel is still going to be wholesale, and we're just selling accessories in this case, just going to sell those t-shirts that we quoted earlier. If this information wasn't filled in, of course, I could type it manually. I am going to create this sales order with a reference. So if I were starting with this as my first step, I wouldn't have to do this next little bit where I'm clicking the Create with Reference button. And I'm going to find the quotation that we created earlier. And you'll recall I copied the number to my notepad, so it's easy to paste in. But obviously you could go search for it if you needed to. I'm going to click Copy. And what we're going to see in our sales order is that much of the information is already filled in for us because it's based upon that earlier quote. If some of this information wasn't filled in, we were starting from scratch, or for some reason the quotation was missing some information, we could fill it in at this point. There is one additional piece of information that we need to enter on this form, and that is the purchase order number. This is the PO number that belongs to the customer. This is not the purchase order number that our system automatically generates. You'll recall in the earlier video, we generated a PO and the number started with a 45. This purchase order number is something that would be generated by our customer's SAP system or ERP system, and they would provide it to us. However, in this class, we have to pretend that this is a real customer, even though they're not, which means we need to make up the purchase order number that they would have given us in the real world. And you're going to see me always type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because it's easy to remember and makes no difference to us. This would make a big difference to our customer when they receive these t-shirts in their inventory. They'd be going through something like Amigo and they'd be receiving these items and they would be expecting a box with the appropriate labeling. So this number is definitely really important to them, but of course it's fictitious in our example, so I just make something up. Everything else at this point looks pretty good as far as the sales order is concerned. I'm going to click the green checkbox to make sure that the system is happy and I don't see any error messages. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save for our standard order. Depending upon how your system is configured, you may or may not get a pop-up to print your sales order. You can ignore this by clicking Cancel. If it doesn't pop up, great. And you're going to want to copy down your sales order number. It's going to be a single or double digit number. Maybe late in the semester we'll get into triple digits. But it's something you're going to want to know for future reference. Now that we've collected a sales order from our customer, we have to go through the process of sending them the items and then sending them a bill and then collecting money from them. So the first step we're going to go through is sending the items that we promised to this customer. And the location of this transaction is in logistics. It's in sales and distribution. It's in shipping and transportation, right underneath the sales folder. And we're going to pursue an outbound delivery. We're going to create this document, and it's specifically a single document. And the transaction code is VL01N. We're going to create an outbound delivery with reference to a sales order. The shipping point will need to be filled in by you. It will be related to the plant where you're selling these things. In our case, it's the Miami plant for the East Coast. If we were selling from the West Coast, it would be San Diego. The order number should be filled in. If it's not, you could copy and paste from your notepad, or you could go search for it. I'm going to go ahead and click the green checkbox to move to the next screen. We are going to be shipping 10 shirts to Peachtree Bikes. And what we need to do in this transaction is go to the Picking tab, which may or may not already be highlighted on your screen. If it's not, choose the Picking tab. And we need to do 3 things. In later examples, these 3 things may not happen at the exact same time, but for this early, simple example, we're going to do all of this at the exact same time. We need to enter a storage location. For some reason, this particular data entry seems to elude students based upon past experience. So make sure in your notes you write down in big bold letters that under SLOC, storage location, you type in where you're going to be getting these items. T-shirts are trade goods. I'm going to be retrieving them from TG00. The second item that I'm going to enter in this particular example is how many I'm going to send them. They're expecting 10. I'm going to send them all 10. And then the third thing I need to do is not click the save button. That would save this document without actually moving it forward. At this point, I want to post the goods issue, which is different than just saving the document. If you don't click post goods issue, the next transaction will not work correctly. So make sure, again in your notes, you write down that you're clicking on post goods issue. You're entering a storage location, you're entering the picked quantity, and you're clicking post goods issue. That will create an outbound delivery document, which always starts with an 8. You're going to want to copy that number down. And at this point, we have shipped items out of our inventory to our customer. In later videos where we explore what's happening behind the scenes, we'll note that our inventory actually decreased by 10 units of t-shirts in the Miami plant. Now that we have shipped those items to the customer, we need to bill the customer so that we can collect money from them for their purchase. This transaction code is still in logistics. It's still in sales and distribution, but it's in the billing folder, which is right underneath shipping and transportation. We're entering a billing document, and we're creating this document from scratch, VF01. If you've done everything correctly, you should see your most recent outbound delivery document listed on this screen, and you can put the checkbox or dot right next to it. This is what we want to process. If you see multiple documents here, they could be from other users in the class. You want to ignore them. Or they could be outbound delivery documents that you have not correctly billed in past transaction examples, and you're going to want to clear those up. In this case, I only see mine, and it's the one I just recently created, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and click next to it and click the Enter button. And all I have to do at this point is save this. Everything was grayed out. I couldn't do anything else if I wanted to. I'm going to ignore the print prompt, and I'm good to go. This does create a document number. It's not something we need to reference in the future, so I'm not going to copy and paste it. Now that we've invoiced the customer, the last thing that would happen is the accounting department would receive a payment from this customer. We're going to go ahead and go through that transaction. This is not in logistics. This is an accounting transaction. It's a financial accounting transaction. It's an accounts receivable transaction, specifically a document entry, and the code is F-28, incoming payments. This transaction looks remarkably similar to F-53, which is outgoing payments. So be careful to not switch these two up. They look almost exactly the same. If you're getting error messages and you can't seem to enter the appropriate customer or vendor, you might be in the wrong transaction. So be very careful that you don't get these two confused. I'm speaking from personal experience. I tend to mix these up. The document date should be today's date. The bank account should always be $100,000. The amount that this customer owes us is $300. The customer we just sold to is Peachtree Bikes, which is 4, and then your 3 digits. And once I've entered all that information, I'm going to click on Process Open Items. If you've done everything correctly, the amount that's entered and the amount that is assigned will match with the earlier document we created using VF01, and your not assigned will be equal to 0. If for some reason it's not, go back to the previous screen and fix whatever you entered that was incorrect. You must enter the appropriate amount. You can't leave anything on the table in our version of Global Bike in SAP. At this point, I can click Save. And now we've collected payment from this customer for this order. The major transactions we go through for fulfillment: creating a sales quotation, creating a sales order, issuing our goods with an outbound delivery with reference to our sales order, invoicing our customer, and then collecting payment in accounts receivable. There are lots of other investigatory transactions that we will explore in a future video, but for now we've worked through the basic process of selling some of our items to an outside customer. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.